The Imperial Vista restaurant shimmered on that Friday night in Lake Tahoe. Located in the heart of the most elegant tourist city in Northern California, the establishment was known for hosting the cream of American society. While the Californian, winter showed its strength outside. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere remained cozy, with a lit fireplace and the unmistakable aroma of fine spices that seasoned the elaborate dishes prepared by the French chef hired at great expense. Tyler Mitchell, manager of the establishment for 5 years, observed the packed dining room with satisfaction. Executives from large companies, famous artists and influential politicians occupied strategically positioned tables to ensure both privacy and visibility, depending on the client's desire. The waiters, impeccably dressed in burgundy uniforms, glided between tables with silver trays, serving dishes that cost the equivalent of a minimum wage. "Mr. Mitchell, the sommelier asks if you've approved the new wine list for the weekend," said Rebecca, the head hostess, approaching discreetly. "Tell Paul I'll do it in half an hour. Right now I need to make sure the senator's table is perfect. He reserved for 9 and it's already almost 8:30. Tyler adjusted his tie and ran his hand through his carefully combed gray hair. At 52, he carried in his countenance the confidence of someone who knows all the secrets of the high-end culinary world. His work at Imperial Vista had put the restaurant on the map of the most exclusive establishments in the country. When the clock struck 8:40, the entrance door opened, letting in a gust of cold air. The young man who crossed the threshold seemed out of place in that environment. He wore faded jeans, a plaid flannel shirt, and visibly worn suede boots. His black hair, slightly long, framed a face with striking features that revealed his native American heritage mixed with European ancestry. Kai Rivers, 28, looked around with contained curiosity. He didn't show amazement, just a silent attention, like someone recognizing a territory they had already visited in dreams. His dark brown eyes, observant, captured every detail: the sophisticated floral arrangements, the crystals that reflected the yellowish light, the customers who conversed in low tones to maintain the elegance of the atmosphere. The murmur of conversations gradually diminished. It was the women who first noticed his presence, pulling their Chanel and Louis Vuitton bags discreetly closer, as if the young man represented some kind of threat. Then, the men cast looks of estrangement, some even of disdain. A white-haired gentleman in an Italian suit ostentatiously turned his face away when Kai passed by his table. "May I help you?" asked Rebecca, the hostess, interposing herself in the young man's path before he advanced further into the dining room. "Good evening. I'd like a table, please," replied Kai with a calm and polite voice. Rebecca hesitated for a second, her eyes quickly assessing the young man's appearance. "Do you have a reservation?" she asked, although she knew perfectly well that there was no reservation for someone with that profile. "No, I don't. But I see there are some tables available near the window," Kai pointed out naturally. Before Rebecca could respond, Tyler Mitchell approached with quick steps. His gaze was a mixture of surprise and poorly disguised indignation. "Any problem? Rebecca?" "This gentleman wants a table but doesn't have a reservation," explained the hostess, subtly emphasizing the word gentleman. Tyler stared Kai up and down without any effort to disguise his judgment. His face assumed an expression that mixed superiority and displeasure. "I'm sorry, but Imperial Vista operates exclusively with advance reservations. Besides, we have a very specific dress code," he said, pointing with his eyes to the young man's simple clothes. Kai remained impassive, just observing the manager calmly. "I understand. However, I'm seeing several empty tables, and I believe I can pay for the service offered." Tyler crossed his arms and, without bothering to lower his voice, replied, "Look, young man, I'll be direct. This is not a restaurant for just anyone. Our clientele is exclusive, people who value a select environment. I suggest you look for a place more suitable to your profile." Silence took over the restaurant. Conversations at nearby tables completely ceased as everyone waited for that embarrassing situation to unfold. Some clients exchanged complicit glances, others laughed softly, and an elderly lady murmured something about standards falling. Kai looked around, noticing all eyes fixed on him, some curious, others disdainful. For a brief moment, his eyes met those of a young woman who seemed uncomfortable with the situation, but she quickly looked away. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," insisted Tyler, now with a firmer voice. "I don't want to create an unpleasant scene, but this establishment has the right to select its clientele." It was then that Kai, still maintaining his serene posture, calmly pronounced, "My name is Kai Rivers. I'm the grandson of Gerald Ainsworth." The effect of those words was immediate. Tyler Mitchell turned pale as if he had seen a ghost. His hands, previously firmly crossed against his chest, fell to his sides, and his mouth opened slightly in an expression of absolute shock. What did you say?" he stammered, loosening his tie with trembling fingers. "Gerald Ainsworth is my grandfather," repeated Kai without changing his tone of voice. "I believe you know him well." A few meters away, the waiters looked at each other, confused, while customers at nearby tables frowned, realizing that something extraordinary was happening. The name Gerald Ainsworth was well known throughout the country. The largest coffee producer in America, owner of plantations that stretched for acres in Northern California and Oregon, and, what few knew at that moment, the true owner of the land and building where Imperial Vista operated. Tyler tried to regain his composure, but it was too late. Sweat began to form small drops on his forehead, and his face alternated between paleness and redness. "Mr. Rivers, I had no idea. Please forgive me for the misunderstanding," he stammered, gesturing nervously. "It's an unexpected honor to receive you in our humble establishment." The manager's attitude changed completely in a matter of seconds. Now he smiled forcefully, trying to erase his previous arrogance with an almost pathetic subservience. "If you'll allow me, we have the best table in the house waiting for you," continued Tyler, indicating a privileged table near the fireplace. "It will be a pleasure to serve you personally tonight." But Kai remained motionless, his eyes fixed on Tyler, as if he could see through that sudden change in behavior. The entire restaurant seemed to have frozen. All eyes turned to that surprising scene that was unfolding. "Actually," said Kai with a calm voice, "I appreciate the offer, but I believe we have more important matters to discuss than tonight's dinner." A chill ran down Tyler Mitchell's spine. Those simple words carried a weight that he understood perfectly well. What Gerald Ainsworth's grandson really wanted was not dinner, but something much more significant. And by the young man's determined look, Tyler knew that his career and the future of Imperial Vista could be hanging by a thread. "Please follow me to my office," said Tyler, trying to maintain his composure as he guided Kai away from the curious eyes of the customers. The manager's office was at the back of the restaurant, an elegant room with walls covered in dark wood and shelves filled with books about gastronomy and wines. A large window offered a view of the illuminated gardens that surrounded Imperial Vista. "Please sit down," indicated Tyler, pointing to a leather armchair. Kai observed the environment for a few moments before accepting the invitation. He sat down with tranquility, as if he were accustomed to frequenting offices like that regularly. His calm gaze contrasted with Tyler's evident anxiety, who nervously fiddled with the buttons of his jacket while settling into the chair on the other side of the desk. "Mr. Rivers, I really apologize for the misunderstanding out there. If I had known who you were—" "That's exactly the problem, isn't it?" interrupted Kai, his voice firm but without hostility. "The differential treatment based on who the person is, or rather on who you think they are." Tyler swallowed hard. For years he had managed Imperial Vista with an iron fist, building its reputation as an exclusive establishment, frequented only by the elite. His job was to ensure that the standard was maintained, which meant in practice selecting clientele based on appearances and social influence. "We have standards to maintain, sir. Our clientele expects a certain environment," he tried to justify. "And does that environment include publicly humiliating people?" questioned Kai, leaning slightly forward. "Does my grandfather know how you run this place?" The mention of old Gerald Ainsworth made Tyler pale again. The 82-year-old businessman rarely appeared in public in recent years, preferring to manage his businesses from his historic estate in Northern California. The relationship between Gerald and the restaurant was kept secret. Officially, Imperial Vista belonged to a holding company, and very few people knew that the true owner was the patriarch of the Ainsworth family. "Mr. Ainsworth has always given me autonomy to manage the restaurant as I saw fit," replied Tyler, his voice less confident than he would like. "In the last 5 years, we have transformed Imperial Vista into the most prestigious establishment in Lake Tahoe." Kai nodded slowly, his eyes assessing each reaction of the manager. "And what was the cost of that, Mr. Mitchell? How many people like me were humiliated at the door?" The silence that followed was more revealing than any answer. Tyler adjusted his tie again, a nervous habit that intensified when he felt cornered. "I'll be direct with you," continued Kai, his calm tone contrasting with the seriousness of his words. "I'm here at my grandfather's request. He's very ill." Basatise. Information caught Tyler by surprise. News about old Ainsworth's health was kept in absolute secrecy, away from tabloids and social networks. "I'm very sorry, I didn't know." "Few do. My grandfather is a private man," replied Kai. "He asked me to personally verify how his businesses are doing before making important changes." "Changes?" Tyler couldn't hide the fear in his voice. "Yes. My grandfather is reviewing all his investments and properties. Imperial Vista is just the first on the list." Tyler felt his blood freeze. For years he had managed the restaurant with complete freedom, reporting only quarterly, through financial reports sent to the central office of Ainsworth Enterprises. Gerald never questioned his methods, as long as the numbers were in the black, and they always were. "Mr. Rivers, the restaurant has never been better financially. Our revenue increased 30% in the last year, and reservations are always booked weeks in advance." Kai smiled slightly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "My grandfather always told me that numbers don't tell the complete story of a business. That's why he sent me here, to see with my own eyes what the reports don't show." The tension in the air was palpable. Tyler began to realize that this visit was not a coincidence or a whim of the owner's grandson. There was a clear purpose, and the way he was received at the restaurant door seemed to have only confirmed something that Gerald already suspected. "Your grandfather never complained about my methods before," Tyler tried to argue. "Maybe because he didn't fully know your methods," Kai retorted. "Or maybe because he's re-evaluating what really matters now that—" Kai didn't complete the sentence, but it wasn't necessary. The implication hung in the air. Now that Gerald was facing serious health problems, his priorities had changed. "My grandfather built his empire from scratch, Mr. Mitchell. Son of rural workers, he started as a coffee picker at age 12. He never forgot his origins, even after becoming one of the richest men in the country." Tyler listened in silence, feeling the weight of those words. Gerald Ainsworth's story was almost legendary in American business circles. The poor boy who, through hard work and keen business intelligence, built a coffee empire, later expanding to hotels, wineries, and other luxury ventures. He told me how he managed to buy his first plantation, how he faced prejudice because of his humble origin, how he had doors closed in his face, continued Kai. Ironic that a restaurant he himself owns is perpetuating that same kind of discrimination, don't you think? The blow was precise. Tyler tried to formulate a response, but words seemed to escape him. How to explain to the owner's grandson that exclusivity was an essential part of the business, that the rich clients of Imperial Vista came precisely because they knew they wouldn't share the environment with just anyone. "Mr. Rivers, I understand your concern, but I need to explain how the high-end gastronomy market works. Our customers—" "Your customers expect exclusivity, I know," interrupted Kai. "But there's a difference between exclusivity and elitism, between high price and public humiliation. Imperial Vista crossed that line a long time ago, it seems." Tyler felt a drop of sweat descend from his temple. Suddenly, his 27 years of career in high-end gastronomy, the awards the restaurant had won under his management, everything seemed to be at risk. "What exactly does your grandfather intend to do?" he finally asked, fearing the answer. Kai relaxed, a bit in the armchair, studying the man in front of him. "That depends partially on the report I'll make to him, and partially on you." On me? Yes, my grandfather believes people deserve a second chance. He gave me one when I needed it most. There was something in Kai's voice, a contained emotion that sparked Tyler's curiosity. Behind that official mission, there seemed to be a personal story. "Are you and your grandfather close?" he risked asking. Kai hesitated for a moment, as if deciding how much of his personal life to share. "We weren't always. I grew up with my mother in Seattle. She was Gerald's daughter with a Native American woman he met during a trip to the Pacific Northwest in the 90s. My grandfather only officially recognized my mother when she was already an adult." The revelation surprised Tyler. That detail of Gerald Ainsworth's life had never been mentioned in business magazines or unauthorized biographies. "My mother passed away 3 years ago," continued Kai with a lower voice. "That's when I got closer to my grandfather. He welcomed me, offered me a place in his companies. I initially refused. I had my own life, worked as a forest engineer in conservation projects." "And what made you change your mind?" asked Tyler, genuinely interested. "I didn't completely change. I still work with environmental conservation, but I agreed to get to know the family businesses better. My grandfather is concerned about his legacy, not just material, but ethical. He wants to make sure that what he built won't be used to perpetuate the same prejudices he faced." Tyler was beginning to understand the dimension of the situation. He wasn't just in front of the owner's grandson, but possibly the future heir to an empire, and more importantly, someone with values very different from those he had promoted at Imperial Vista during all these years. "What happens now?" he asked, trying to keep his voice firm. Kai looked at his watch and then faced Tyler with determination. "Now, we're going back to the dining room. I want to dine in your restaurant. Mr. Mitchell, at the table you tried to deny me, and I want you to serve me personally, exactly as you would serve any customer who arrived wearing a $10,000 suit." The request, or rather the order, was simple, but loaded with meaning. It wasn't just about dinner, but a test, a chance for redemption, or the final confirmation that drastic changes would be necessary. "Certainly, Mr. Rivers," agreed Tyler, standing up. "It will be an honor to serve you." When both left the office back to the main dining room, the curious looks of customers and staff followed them. The buzz of conversations diminished again, everyone eager to understand what was happening. The transformation in Tyler's posture was evident. Where before there was disdain, now there was deference. Upon reaching the best table in the restaurant, strategically positioned near the fireplace, and with a view of the illuminated gardens, Tyler personally pulled out the chair for Kai to sit, a gesture he would normally delegate to one of the waiters. "May I recommend the tasting menu prepared by our chef?" he suggested with a nervous smile. "Please," replied Kai, carefully observing each reaction and movement of Tyler and the team. What none of those present knew, including Tyler, was that that night would be just the beginning of a much larger transformation for Imperial Vista, and for everyone involved. The true extent of Gerald Ainsworth's plans for his grandson, and for his businesses, was yet to be revealed, and the events that would follow would forever change not only the restaurant, but the lives of everyone who worked there. 3 months had passed since the night Kai Rivers entered Imperial Vista. Spring was coming to Lake Tahoe, bringing new colors to the gardens that surrounded the restaurant. But the changes in nature were minimal compared to the transformations that were taking place inside the establishment. Imperial Vista remained as elegant as ever, but something fundamental had changed. The environment, previously charged with ostentatious elitism, now breathed a more welcoming sophistication. The same crystal chandeliers illuminated the dining room, the same silver cutlery gleamed on the linen tablecloths, but the spirit of the place was different. Tyler Mitchell observed the movement of the restaurant from a discreet corner. His countenance had changed in recent months. The air of superiority had given way to a more serene expression, although he still maintained the same efficiency as always. Dressed in his usual impeccable suit, he attentively followed the work of the waiters while occasionally consulting his tablet, where a new reservation system was implemented. "Mr. Mitchell, the Sullivan family arrived for lunch," informed Ryan, the young maitre d' who had been recently promoted. They didn't have a reservation, but we managed to accommodate them at table 7. Excellent, Ryan. Make sure they are well served, replied Tyler with a brief smile that still seemed a little forced, as if he were adapting to a new way of interacting. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, a different buzz took over the environment. Chef Arnaud, French by birth and American by choice, worked together with Miss Betty, a 62-year-old lady who until 3 months ago had been selling homemade treats at the local farmers' market. The unlikely partnership had emerged after one of the many changes implemented by Kai, a new menu that merged international haute cuisine with authentic American flavors. Non, 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 exclaimed Arnaud, gesturing dramatically. The cornbread stuffing needs to rest 5 more minutes before finishing the dish. And the sauce needs more cayenne pepper, you stubborn Frenchman, Betty shot back with a smile that softened her words. Let me show you how it's done. The scene would have been unthinkable in the old Imperial Vista, where the kitchen was an exclusive territory of chefs trained in the most prestigious culinary schools in Europe. Now traditional knowledge dialogued as equals with the refined techniques of international gastronomy. At the entrance of the restaurant, Rebecca, the hostess, was receiving a young couple. The young man wore a casual shirt, and the young woman, a simple dress far from the ostentatious luxury that would have been required previously. Welcome to Imperial Vista. Do you have a reservation? Asked Rebecca with a genuine smile. Yes, under the name Eric Silverman, replied the young man, somewhat nervous, as if fearing to be judged at any moment. Rebecca quickly consulted the system. Oh, of course. Table for 2, anniversary celebration. Isn't it? She confirmed to the couple's surprise. We have a special table prepared for you. Please follow me. Discreetly, as she guided them through the dining room, Rebecca sent a message to the team informing them about the special occasion. In a matter of minutes, a bottle of domestic sparkling wine would be served as a courtesy of the house, another recent innovation. Outside the restaurant, a modest car parked. From it descended Kai Rivers, now wearing a well-cut suit, but without the ostentation of luxury brands. At his side, an elderly gentleman walked slowly, supported by a carved wooden cane. Gerald Ainsworth, at 82, maintained an erect posture despite his age and the illness he was facing. His eyes, the same dark brown tone as Kai's, shone with a mixture of pride and curiosity. So this is the place that has been causing so much stir in recent months, commented the patriarch, observing the elegant facade of the restaurant. They say it's impossible to get a last-minute reservation. It's true, confirmed Kai, offering support to his grandfather as they climbed the entrance steps. But I think we'll get an exception today. Gerald chuckled softly, a hoarse sound that revealed the years of Cuban cigars he had consumed in his youth, some advantages in being the owner after all. When they entered the restaurant, Tyler Mitchell, who was talking with one of the sommeliers, immediately noticed the presence of the pair. His eyes widened momentarily upon recognizing the patriarch of the Ainsworth family. In all the years he had managed Imperial Vista, he had never personally received the true owner. Mr. Ainsworth, he exclaimed, approaching quickly, it's an immense honor to receive you. Gerald studied Tyler for a few moments before extending his hand for a firm handshake. So you're the famous Tyler Mitchell. My grandson has been talking a lot about you in recent months. Tyler shot a quick glance at Kai, trying to decipher if this was good or bad. I hope positively, sir, he replied with a cautious smile. That depends on how we define positive, commented Gerald with an amused gleam in his eyes. But I'm here to see with my own eyes the changes that you two have implemented. My grandson assured me it's worth the trip from Northern California to here. Tyler personally guided the owner and his grandson to the best table in the restaurant, the same one where Kai had dined on that fateful night 3 months ago. As they walked through the dining room, Gerald carefully observed the environment, the customers, the employees. Nothing escaped the experienced eye of the businessman who had built an empire from nothing. I see some new faces on the team, commented Gerald after they sat down. Yes, sir, confirmed Tyler. We expanded our team following the guidelines of the inclusion project that your grandson proposed. And how has it been working? Asked the patriarch with genuine interest. Before Tyler could respond, a young waiter approached to serve water. Jason was only 19, and came from a suburb of Oakland. He was part of the first class of the training program implemented by Kai, which offered professional training for young people from disadvantaged communities. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," greeted Jason, with a slightly nervous smile upon recognizing Kai. "Welcome to Imperial Vista. Can I bring you something to drink while you choose from the menu?" "A whiskey for me, please, no ice," requested Gerald. "Sir, with all due respect, the doctor was very clear about alcoholic beverages," intervened Kai with a concerned tone. Gerald rolled his eyes but smiled with resignation. All right, a chamomile tea then, but with honey to compensate for the lack of whiskey." Jason noted the order and walked away, but not before exchanging a quick glance with Kai, who nodded discreetly in approval. "You know him?" asked Gerald, observing the interaction. "Jason was one of the first young men we recruited for the training program," explained Kai. "He had potential but lacked opportunity. Today he's one of the most dedicated employees we have." Gerald turned to Tyler, who was listening to the conversation in silence. "And so, Mr. Mitchell, my question remains. How has this new model been working?" Tyler took a deep breath before answering. In the first days after Kai's visit, he had resisted the proposed changes. The idea of opening the doors of Imperial Vista to a more diverse audience and hiring staff without previous experience in high-end gastronomy seemed absurd to him, a risk to the establishment's reputation. But the alternative was to lose his job and see the restaurant he had helped to build pass into other hands. "I confess I was skeptical at first, Mr. Ainsworth," admitted Tyler. "I thought we would lose our traditional clientele and that the quality of service would be compromised. I was wrong." Gerald raised his eyebrows, surprised by the frankness. "Our revenue increased 40% in the last quarter," continued Tyler. "We kept most of the old customers and attracted a new profile of public. Young, successful professionals, couples celebrating special occasions, international tourists seeking authentic experiences." "And what about the training program?" asked Gerald. "We had some difficulties at the beginning," acknowledged Tyler, "but the retention rate is surprising. More than 90% of the young people who started the training are still with us, and the level of commitment is inspiring." "The way," Tyler said the last word revealed a personal transformation. The man who once saw people's value only by what they wore or how much they could spend, now recognized deeper qualities. Jason returned with Gerald's tea and water, with lemon for Kai. While placing the drinks on the table, the young waiter noticed Mr. Ainsworth's carved cane. "If I may comment, sir, that cane is a work of art," he said with genuine interest. "It looks like artisanal work from Native American communities of the Pacific Northwest." Gerald looked at the young man with surprise. "Exactly that. It was a gift from my friend Peter Wilson, who works with traditional communities in Washington State. How did you recognize it?" "My grandmother is from the Tulalip tribes," explained Jason with a proud smile. "She taught me to identify the different carving styles. That specific pattern is characteristic of the artisans of the Pacific Northwest." When Jason walked away, Gerald turned to his grandson with an approving smile. "Impressive. It's not every day I meet someone who recognizes Native American craftsmanship." "It's these unexpected connections we've been discovering," commented Kai. "People with knowledge and talents that would never have had space in an environment like this in the past." Lunch proceeded with Chef Arnaud and Miss Betty personally coming to present the tasting menu, specially prepared for the occasion. The unusual combination of French techniques with American ingredients resulted in dishes that told stories. A carpaccio of smoked brisket with hickory oil, ravioli stuffed with Vermont cheddar and blackberry sauce, a dessert of wild berries with French pastry cream, and a crunchy pecan crumble. Between conversations, Gerald carefully observed everything around him. The new sommelier, a young black man who had grown up in the vineyards of Napa Valley, the receptionist who fluently spoke 5 languages, including Mandarin, the pianist who played Chopin and Duke Ellington with the same elegance. Diversity had not diminished quality. On the contrary, it had brought new perspectives and authenticity. "I must confess, Kai," said Gerald when they finished dessert, "that when you proposed these changes to me, I thought it was youthful idealism. I didn't believe that a high-end restaurant could become more inclusive without losing its essence. And what do you think now? Asked Kai, with a slight smile. I think your mother would be proud, replied the old patriarch, his voice choked with emotion. She always told me that true luxury isn't in excluding, but in creating meaningful experiences that respect people and their stories. Gerald paused, taking a sip of water before continuing. When I learned of my diagnosis, I began to think a lot about legacy, not just about money or properties, but about the values I'll leave behind. Imperial Vista has always been a symbol of exclusivity, but you've transformed it into a symbol of accessible excellence. That's much more valuable. Tyler, who had remained silent during the meal, intervened with humility. The credit goes to your grandson, Mr. Ainsworth. He could simply have fired me after that night, but he chose to give me a chance to learn and grow along with the restaurant. It was a strategic decision, explained Kai. Tyler knows this business better than anyone. The problem was never his competence, but the philosophy that guided his decisions. Once that changed, his experience became even more valuable. Gerald agreed with a nod, and then looked directly at Tyler. And now, Mr. Mitchell, what does the future hold for Imperial Vista? Tyler had been waiting for this moment. In recent weeks, he had worked on an expansion plan that he had initially been reluctant to present to Kai, fearing it was too radical. With your and Kai's permission, I would like to implement a scholarship program for young cooks from disadvantaged communities, he began with growing enthusiasm. I also thought about using the space at the back of the restaurant for cooking classes on weekends, open to the community. And what about expansion to other cities? Asked Gerald. I believe the model we've developed here can be replicated, replied Tyler. Not as a standardized chain, but as unique restaurants that celebrate the local cuisine of each region, maintaining the same commitment to inclusion and quality. The conversation was interrupted by a soft melody coming from Kai's smartphone. It's the reminder for your medicine, Grandpa, he explained, taking a small pill case from his pocket. We can't be late. Gerald accepted the medication with a resigned sigh. That's the least pleasant part of aging. So many pills, so many restrictions. But it's worth it, said Kai affectionately. We need you for a long time yet. There's a lot of work ahead. As Kai helped his grandfather with the medication, Tyler observed the interaction with a new understanding. The transformation of Imperial Vista wasn't just a business project. It was part of something much larger, a reconnection between generations, and a redefinition of family values. A few tables away, the young couple celebrating their anniversary received complimentary sparkling wine. The joy on their faces at being treated as valuable customers, regardless of the value of their clothes or their purchasing power, was living proof that true hospitality does not discriminate. I think it's time for us to go, Kai, said Gerald, after taking his medicine. The trip back to Northern California is long, and the doctor recommended that I rest. Tyler immediately stood up to help Mr. Ainsworth, but Gerald made a gesture for him to wait. Before I go, I want to tell you something, Mr. Mitchell, said the patriarch with seriousness. I spent my life building an empire based on quality and exclusivity. I thought these values were incompatible with accessibility and inclusion. My grandson proved to me that I was wrong, and you helped to realize that vision. Tyler received the words with barely disguised emotion. Thank you for your trust, Mr. Ainsworth. And as for you, Kai, continued Gerald, turning to his grandson, I confirm today that I made the right decision. Ainsworth Enterprises will be in good hands when the time comes. It was the first time Gerald had openly mentioned his intention to pass control of the empire to his grandson, the same young man who 3 months ago had been barred at the door of Imperial Vista for not fitting the established standards of an ideal customer. As he accompanied grandfather and grandson to the exit, Tyler reflected on how a single night had completely changed the course of his life and his values. The lesson he had learned from Kai was simple, but profound. The true value of a person is never in their appearance or social status, but in their character and actions. Outside, the spring sun illuminated the gardens of Imperial Vista, symbolizing the new beginning not only for the restaurant, but for everyone involved in that story of personal and collective transformation. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Kai and Tyler has touched your hearts and provoked reflections on how we judge people at first sight. For more moving stories like this, we've prepared a special playlist that explores themes of overcoming prejudice and personal transformation. Find it here, clicking on the left. If you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on the video. Every day we bring new stories that explore the complexity of human relationships and the values that really matter in life. We're eager to read your comments and know which part of this story touched your heart the most. Until the next narrative.